My name is Autumn Cooper, and at 28, I thought I had everything figured out. Standing in my modest apartment that Tuesday evening, staring at the engagement ring Marcus had just handed back to me, I felt my world crumble into microscopic pieces. "I'm sorry, Autumn," he said, his voice carrying that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "But she's more ambitious, more successful. She has a real future at Henderson and Associates." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Henderson and Associates, the marketing firm where he worked, where he'd met his precious Sarah, was mine. Had been mine for 3 years, purchased through a shell company, while I played the role of struggling freelance graphic designer. Marcus had no idea the woman he was leaving for someone more successful actually owned his entire professional world. The betrayal cut deeper because of our history. Marcus and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months. We'd met in college, 2 broke students dreaming of making it big in the creative world. I'd supported him through his master's degree, celebrated when he landed his dream job at Henderson and Associates, and listened to countless stories about his brilliant colleagues. Sarah Martinez had started appearing in those stories 6 months ago. Always Sarah this, Sarah that. Sarah's innovative campaigns, Sarah's client presentations, Sarah's rapid promotions. I'd felt the shift in his attention, but convinced myself I was being paranoid. Now, watching him gather his things from our shared space, I realized my instincts had been screaming warnings I'd chosen to ignore. The man I'd planned to marry was walking away because he thought his coworker was more impressive than me. If only he knew. What Marcus didn't know, what nobody knew except my lawyer and accountant, was that I was Autumn Hayes, heir to Hayes Industries. My grandfather had built a textile empire. My father had diversified into real estate and investments. When he died 2 years ago, I'd inherited everything, including a portfolio worth $43 million. I'd kept the Cooper name from my mother's side, maintained my modest lifestyle, and used shell companies for all my business dealings. Growing up wealthy had taught me that people's motivations became crystal clear when money entered the equation. I'd wanted Marcus to love me for who I was, not what I had. The irony was bitter. He was leaving me because he thought I wasn't successful enough, when I could have bought and sold his precious Henderson and Associates 10 times over. But I'd purchased it quietly 18 months ago when the previous owner needed capital, thinking it might be a good investment. Now it felt like destiny. The next morning, I called David Kim, Henderson and Associates managing director, who reported directly to my shell company, Meridian Holdings. "David, I want detailed reports on all department activities, particularly the marketing division," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "And I want to understand our promotion and project allocation processes." David, efficient as always, promised comprehensive reports by week's end. I spent the following days diving deep into company operations, learning about every employee, every client, every project. Marcus worked in the creative department under Sarah, who'd been promoted to senior creative director just 2 months ago. Reading through her personnel file, I had to admit she was talented. Her campaigns were innovative, her client relationships strong. But talent and character were different things. And I was about to discover exactly what kind of person she really was. The upcoming quarterly review meeting would be my first time observing them together professionally. I was curious to see this dynamic duo in action. 3 weeks after the breakup, I implemented my first strategic move. Through David, I announced that Meridian Holdings would be conducting a comprehensive company review, including shadowing key employees and observing departmental dynamics. I would be the consultant leading this review, operating under my Cooper identity with a carefully crafted backstory about MBA credentials and corporate consulting experience. My first observation session was Marcus's department meeting, where I sat quietly in the corner with my tablet, officially taking notes on workflow efficiency. Watching Sarah lead the meeting was enlightening. She was confident, articulate, and clearly respected by her team. But I also noticed how she dismissed ideas from junior employees, how her eyes lingered on Marcus when she thought nobody was looking, and how she made subtle comments about commitment to excellence that seemed directed at pushing others aside. When Marcus presented his campaign proposal, Sarah's feedback was publicly encouraging but privately condescending. I saw the dynamic clearly now. She was using her position to eliminate competition while building her own empire. The real revelation came during my 4th week of observations. I'd installed myself in the break room with my laptop, appearing to work on reports while actually listening to conversations. Sarah and Marcus didn't know I could hear them through the thin walls separating the break room from the small conference room they'd claimed for strategy sessions. Their conversation made my blood freeze. Once the next round of budget cuts comes through, we can restructure the entire creative department, Sarah was saying. I've already identified which positions to eliminate. Jennifer's too expensive for her output, and Ton's style is getting dated. Marcus laughed, adding, "What about the new consultant? Think she's a threat?" Sarah's response chilled me. Please, some nobody MBA trying to make a name for herself. I've dealt with her type before. Give her enough rope, and she'll hang herself with corporate buzzwords. Besides, I have connections with the ownership group that she'll never have. I sat frozen, realizing that Sarah wasn't just professionally ambitious. She was actively sabotaging colleagues while manipulating Marcus into believing they were partners in some grand career strategy. By month 2 of my infiltration, I'd gathered enough evidence to understand the full scope of what I was dealing with. Sarah had been systematically undermining other employees, taking credit for their work, and using her relationship with Marcus to gather information about office dynamics and weaknesses. She'd convinced him that their relationship was strategic as well as romantic, two ambitious people lifting each other up. Meanwhile, she'd been feeding him information about which colleagues were deadweight and which projects were beneath their level. Marcus, completely smitten and blinded by her apparent success, had become her willing accomplice in office politics. They'd begun making plans not just for their relationship, but for their joint career trajectory. Sarah had her sights set on David's position as managing director, while Marcus believed he'd become creative director when she moved up. Neither realized that every conversation they'd had in that conference room had been documented, every strategic manipulation recorded. I felt sick watching the man I'd loved transform into someone I didn't recognize. But I also felt a cold satisfaction knowing that justice was coming. The perfect opportunity arrived in month 3, the annual company retreat and client showcase. Henderson and Associates hosted this event every September, bringing together employees, major clients, and investors for a weekend of presentations, networking, and strategic planning. This year's theme was innovation and integrity in modern marketing, and Sarah had volunteered to coordinate the entire event, seeing it as her platform to demonstrate leadership capabilities to the ownership group. She'd spent weeks crafting the perfect presentation, designed to showcase not just the company's achievements, but her own indispensable role in driving success. Marcus had helped her prepare, believing they were building their professional reputation together. Neither suspected that the mysterious Meridian Holdings representative, who'd been quietly observing company operations for months, had specifically requested to attend this showcase. David had introduced me to several key clients as the consultant conducting operational reviews, but nobody had asked too many questions about my background or authority. The stage was perfectly set for the revelation that would change everything. Saturday evening of the retreat, Sarah stood before a room filled with Henderson and Associates' most important stakeholders. She dressed immaculately, her presentation was flawless, and her confidence was magnetic. She outlined her vision for the company's future, detailing strategic initiatives and growth opportunities with impressive precision. Marcus watched adoringly from the audience, clearly proud of his brilliant girlfriend and her meteoric rise through corporate ranks. Several clients approached me afterward, praising Sarah's presentation and asking about potential expanded partnerships. I smiled politely, taking notes, letting the anticipation build. Sarah had just delivered the performance of her career, cementing her reputation as the company's rising star. The applause was thunderous, the feedback glowing. In her moment of triumph, basking in professional validation and personal satisfaction, Sarah had no idea she'd just handed me the perfect setup for her downfall. The evening was young, and I had one more presentation to give. Tomorrow morning's closing session would feature remarks from Meridian Holdings' principal owner, a surprise guest who'd specifically requested to address recent operational findings and future direction. Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear. The closing session was scheduled for 9 a.m., with continental breakfast followed by what David had announced as special remarks from company leadership. Sarah sat in the front row beside Marcus, both glowing from the previous evening's success and the positive feedback they'd received from clients and colleagues. I'd spent the early morning hours preparing my presentation, reviewing my documentation, and mentally rehearsing the words I'd been planning for months. When David introduced me as the representative from Meridian Holdings with important announcements about our company's future, I saw Sarah lean forward with interest. She likely expected praise for her presentation, perhaps even an announcement about her promotion to managing director. Marcus squeezed her hand supportively, his face bright with anticipation. The room fell silent as I took the podium, looking out at faces filled with curiosity and expectation. "Good morning, everyone," I began, my voice steady despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. "I have some important information to share about Henderson and Associates, its ownership structure, and recent operational findings that will affect our path forward." Before I begin, I continued, I want to address the elephant in the room. Many of you have known me for the past 3 months as Autumn Cooper, MBA consultant, conducting operational reviews for Meridian Holdings. What you don't know is that Autumn Cooper is indeed my legal name, but I'm also Autumn Hayes, sole owner of Hayes Industries and its subsidiary holdings, including Meridian Holdings, which purchased Henderson and Associates 18 months ago. The room erupted in confused murmurs. I saw Sarah's face drain of color, watched Marcus sink back in his chair as recognition began dawning. I've spent these months observing our company operations firsthand, and I've discovered some concerning patterns that require immediate attention. Over the past 6 months, we've documented systematic workplace manipulation, credit theft, and strategic sabotage of colleague relationships and career advancement. I clicked to my first slide, showing a timeline of incidents with specific dates and participants. Sarah's hands were visibly shaking now, and Marcus looked like he'd seen a ghost. The room was dead silent, except for the quiet hum of the projector and my steady voice outlining the findings that would reshape several careers. "Let me be specific about what our investigation uncovered," I said, advancing to detailed documentation. "We have recorded conversations detailing plans to eliminate positions held by qualified employees, evidence of idea theft from junior staff members, and systematic manipulation of departmental dynamics for personal advancement." I played a brief audio clip, Sarah's voice clearly discussing her plans to restructure the department and eliminate expensive employees like Jennifer. The room was frozen as her own words condemned her. We also documented romantic relationships being used as strategic tools for information gathering and career manipulation, with specific discussions about leveraging personal connections to undermine colleagues and advance personal agendas. Marcus was staring at Sarah in horror, finally understanding how he'd been used. But I wasn't finished. Most concerning, we discovered attempts to manipulate company ownership relationships through false claims of connections and influence, along with plans to undermine legitimate business operations through corporate sabotage. I paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle. Sarah looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Marcus looked sick. The clients and other employees were watching with fascination and growing outrage. Effective immediately, I announced, Sarah Martinez's employment with Henderson and Associates is terminated for cause, including violation of professional ethics, workplace manipulation, and attempted corporate sabotage. Her access to company systems and facilities is revoked. Sarah finally found her voice, standing shakily. "You can't do this," she protested, her previous confidence completely shattered. "I have contracts. I have rights. You have documentation proving your systematic violation of those contracts," I interrupted calmly. "Our legal team will be in contact regarding potential civil liability for damages caused by your actions." Security personnel, who'd been discreetly positioned around the room, stepped forward. Sarah looked desperately at Marcus for support, but he was staring at his hands, finally understanding how completely he'd been manipulated. "As for Marcus," I continued, watching his head snap up in panic, "your employment will continue, but you'll be participating in a comprehensive professional development program focused on ethical business practices and appropriate workplace relationships. Consider this your opportunity to rebuild your career foundation." The room remained silent as Sarah was escorted out, her promising career at Henderson and Associates ending in humiliation and professional disgrace. Marcus sat frozen, processing the magnitude of what had just transpired. After the session ended and attendees dispersed, Marcus approached me hesitantly. "Autumn," he said quietly, "I had no idea about any of this, about you being the owner, about Sarah's. I thought she was just ambitious." His voice broke slightly. "I realize how this looks, how badly I misjudged everything, how badly I treated you." I studied his face, seeing genuine remorse, but also the dawning realization of his own complicity. "Marcus, you didn't just misjudge Sarah's character," I replied evenly. "You threw away 4 years together because you thought I wasn't successful enough for your standards. You chose what you perceived as a better opportunity over someone who loved you unconditionally." He opened his mouth to respond, but I continued. "The saddest part isn't that you were manipulated by Sarah. It's that you were willing to abandon our relationship for professional advancement. That speaks to your character, not just your judgment." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "You'll keep your job because you're genuinely talented, and everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes. But our personal relationship is over. That decision was made when you handed me back my engagement ring because you thought I wasn't good enough for your ambitions." 3 months later, Henderson and Associates had transformed into a healthier workplace environment. Jennifer, the employee Sarah had targeted for elimination, was promoted to senior creative director and was thriving in her new role. Tom's dated style had proven popular with several major clients who appreciated his classic approach. The junior employees whose ideas Sarah had stolen were finally receiving proper credit and recognition for their contributions. Marcus had completed his professional development program and was performing well, though he kept his head down and maintained strictly professional relationships with colleagues. He'd tried reaching out to me personally several times, but I'd maintained boundaries. Some betrayals cut too deep for simple apologies to heal. Meanwhile, Sarah had struggled to find new employment, as word of her termination for cause had spread through industry networks. She'd eventually taken a position with a smaller firm at significantly reduced responsibility and compensation. The professional reputation she'd worked so carefully to build had crumbled faster than she'd ever imagined possible. Justice, I'd learned, sometimes required patience and strategic thinking, but it was ultimately more satisfying than immediate revenge. As for me, I decided to take a more active role in running Henderson and Associates rather than remaining a silent investor. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about leadership, about the importance of understanding your business from ground level, and about the power of strategic patience. I'd also learned that my instinct to keep my wealth private had been correct. People's motivations were indeed clearer when money wasn't a factor, even if those motivations sometimes proved disappointing. David Kim had proven to be an excellent managing director, and together we'd implemented new policies focused on ethical business practices, employee development, and creating advancement opportunities based on merit rather than manipulation. The company was more profitable than ever, but more importantly, it had become a place where talented people could thrive without fear of sabotage or manipulation. My grandfather would have been proud of how I'd handled the situation, with intelligence, patience, and decisive action when the moment was right. The business lessons had been invaluable, but the personal lessons had been priceless. Standing in my new corner office 6 months after the retreat, looking out at the city skyline, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed. The modest apartment had been replaced by a penthouse that reflected my true financial status, though I still maintained my preference for understated elegance over flashy displays of wealth. I'd kept the Cooper name professionally. Finding that it suited my preference for earning respect through actions rather than inherited reputation, the company was thriving under my direct leadership, and I'd discovered a genuine passion for the marketing industry that went beyond simple investment returns. Several major clients had specifically requested to continue working with Henderson and Associates because of the ethical transformation they'd witnessed. More importantly, I'd learned to trust my instincts about people's character and to value authenticity over perceived success. The experience with Marcus and Sarah had been painful, but it had also been educational. I'd gained confidence in my ability to handle complex business situations, learned the importance of strategic patience, and discovered that sometimes the best revenge was simply allowing people's true natures to reveal themselves. The woman who'd been dumped for someone more successful had emerged stronger, wiser, and more successful than ever.